Today sponsored by Shoshana Strauss in memory of her father, David Ben Aaron HaKohen, whose yard site is da 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 da.
Good. What's the address? Yeah. And there's a problem. Yes. Anyway.
Shalom לכולם. Hi everybody. Shalom, I'm happy to be here. Boker Tov, I'm happy to be here again. Boker Tov זה בית מדרש בוקר, נכון? It's like in the contract of Torah Mitzion. Yeah, this is a Torah Mitzion. So in the contract it was printed that if you stay for a third year, and between the second year and the third year you'll have Bikur Moledet. Bikur Bikur Moledet. Okay, visiting the... of course everything is in English, so remember that.
I thought Boker was the name of the sponsor.
Boker, מצוין. טוב, okay. Does belief provide answers or questions? Okay, I'm not sure we're going to cover the entire thing this week. It's okay. We're meeting Bezrat Hashem next week. And if we'll cover, then there is a good topic for next week. No worries. At any rate, okay, we will connect it to Chodesh Adar. We're in Bet Be'adar. So, I'll just say briefly that in Purim, as we know, that there is a known contrast between the miracles that we just read on the Parshiot and the previous Parshiot about splitting of the Red Sea and the plagues and everything, which were interventions of God in nature, changing nature. As opposed to that, Purim, as we know, if we have a stubborn heretic, he could claim, and we won't have any logical proof against him, that everything was just a coincidence. Yeah, it just happened that Charvona came in the right time, and it just happened, and this, and this, and this. The Gemara says it. In the Gemara in Chulin, it says, Esther min haTorah minayin. What is the source for? Of course, it's a drash. The source for Esther, where is it? Min haTorah, and the answer is V'anochi Esther Astir. The Gemara really wants to say that in as opposed to a world like Moshe and Aaron, and which Hashem's hand was revealed and clear. Needless to say, Ma'amad Har Sinai, all the people of Israel received the prophecy. It was evidential. Yeah, I think I'm using the right word. I hope, meaning there was no doubt. Yeah, it's like if I'm speaking to Paul now, so most people are 100% sure that yes, indeed, I'm speaking to Paul now, and that I'm hearing Paul. So that was the level of evidence, of clarity in the time in the Ma'amad Har Sinai. As opposed to that, the Gemara says Hadur Kibluha Bimei Achashverosh in Shabbat Peichet. The Gemara means to say that there the acceptance of the Torah was out of will, in the sense that they could have chosen differently, meaning that again, despite the great miracle of Megillat Esther, but this great miracle, already when I'm saying great miracle, it's an interpretation. Yeah, that was their feeling. They daven, Esther gathered them to daven, and then they saw everything changed. So they believed that this is really a miracle. And I have to say, in terms of probability, I think that they were right. Yeah, but still, if someone would insist, in terms of, clear logic and proofs, there was no proof. Okay, in the sense that one could have claimed that no one saw God's hand in nature. Yeah, and it's pretty much the world that we're living in on today. We're not. Again, it's here. You could go to all kinds of. I think there were great miracles in the past 2 years. For a while, talking about the 12-day war and stuff like that. But again, a heretic can insist, I don't see God. I can explain everything. Okay, here there was a trick and here was this. Why am I saying that? Because the title, Does Belief Provide Answers or Questions, is referring, this is I must say, I gave a pretty similar share several weeks ago in my community, and that was the first time I gave that share. I mean, it's not a recycle, it's not like an old share that is improving, recycled plus improvements, etc. Because I felt this is this topic is very close to my heart, and it's kind of something that I felt in my stomach, I don't know, for years, and just at a certain point, one Friday, I just downloaded sources that had associations to it, and things that were developing, and I have to give tribute here to my Rabbeim, meaning to Rav Amital and Rav Lichtenstein. I think both of them educated us that we're not necessarily providers of answers always as believers. Especially Rav Amital as a Holocaust survivor. I'll touch that. But Rav Lichtenstein too. And I'll mention one incident that I heard it from, but it was very clear. You'll see later Rav Soloveitchik is quoted if we'll get to it, and as we know, Rav Lichtenstein was his son-in-law. I have to say that I'll start with a certain memory that I have from my early 20s. I saw a documentary. It was part of preparation for some seminar. Seminarion. How do you say seminarion? Seminar. So that 3-day thing that to give for and I think it was to Shirut Leumi. And the name of the documentary, I believe, was Sh'on HaChol. How do you say Sh'on Chol? There is a word for it in English. Not sand clock. Yeah, there is a. Yeah, but that you. What? Hourglass. Hourglass. Yeah. An hourglass. Okay. In Hebrew, it's called Sh'on Chol, because there is a sand there. So hourglass. So. That's the name, I think, of the documentary. And I remember one scene from there. It was talking about Israeli society. And here there was a picture there of a certain rabbi. Maybe I'll say preacher. Okay. The rabbi was speaking with secular high schoolers. Secular, with earrings, and then the scene is going this way. He's telling them, I'm saying it in Hebrew, okay? תשאלו אותי כל שאלה. על כל שאלה יש לי תשובה. אני אתן לכם תשובות לכל השאלות שלכם. He was a מחזיר בתשובה, what? Yeah, exactly. That plus minus, that's the style. And he says, תשאלו אותי כל שאלה. כל שאלה שיש לכם, every question you have, just ask me. I'll provide answers to all your questions. Meaning, he presented religion as an answer supplier. Yeah, that religion has answers to all. And indeed, people. Now, I want to say, we can't deny that in a modern world of dilemmas, and some people look for certainty, for an anchor, for an authority, and they find a home in religion after all their wanderings. I'm not overlooking it. There is also something positive to it. Don't get me wrong. But what I want to say that Rav Amital and Rav Lichtenstein presented the mirror picture of religion to us, meaning that if you're a believer, then you struggle sometimes with dafka because you're a believer, meaning it's not that the belief is the resting place, to all your doubts, and when you're secular, you're lost. When you're a heretic, then look, when you're a heretic, you're lost. If you're a heretic, you're lost in all because you have, you're on your own, etc. I could see that, but presenting that religion is the place where, okay, everything is answered, everything is simple. No, that's not the way I was educated, and I'll try to present here some materials regarding the matter. So I'm starting with the Rambam in Hilchot Shuvah. Actually, the anchor, now I'm telling you the secrets, that I gave the shir, I believe, in either Parshat Va'era or Parshat Bo, and of course, one of the topics there in Parshat Va'era and Parshat Bo is the topic of freedom of choice, because you know the famous question, Pharaoh, God hardens his heart, makes his heart heavy, and perhaps the freedom of choice is taken away from him. So that was the anchor for a famous dispute between the Rambam and the Ravid that I want to share from a different angle, maybe that is usually shared. I thought about that it's an educational. Okay, with no further ado, let's just read. So the Rambam says, in the middle of Hilchot Shuvah, the Rambam says the following. By the way, there is another connection to Chodesh Adar. Sfas Emes says that Chodesh Adar is just like Elul, before the beginning of the year. It's a month of Tshuva, but it's a Tshuva Me'ava. So we're learning in Bet Adar Hilchot Shuvah. שמא תאמר והלא הקדוש ברוך הוא יודע כל מה שיהיה וקודם שיהיה ידע שזה יהיה צדיק או רשע או לא ידע. Meaning, the Rambam presents the famous question that there is a contradiction. We spoke about it in one of our previous series a year or 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, about freedom of choice. If you remember in my series about Judaism and psychology, so at least 1 or 2 shiurim were dedicated to the topic of freedom of choice. So the Rambam here, if we know, with the Rambam has a very strong doctrine that there is a freedom of choice. He defends it very much. He can't understand how can one live religious lives with the sachar and onesh, and you must assume that there is a freedom of choice, because if there is no freedom of choice, then who is God punishing? If he's punishing Avi Kanai, the personality, for doing something, meaning he holds Avi Kanai as responsible, that means that he chose. If Avi Kanai, the personality, didn't choose, rather he was programmed by something, then what's the justification to punish Avi Kanai? That's the basic argument of Maimonides to defend the freedom of choice. 1 second. I had to drink this because if I wouldn't drink it, then my wife drinks coffee, and then she drinks like half a cup, and then they're spread in the house. And I also always tell her, you want me to add some kubiot kerach? So that it won't become for ice cubes. So I drank it. So Shem Tamar והקדוש ברוך הוא יודע כל מה שיהיה וקודם שידע שזה יהיה צדיק או רשע או לא ידע. He says, after all, we know that Kadosh Baruch Hu knows the future, so he knows if this guy will be a tzaddik or a rasha. Im yada shu yeh tzaddik, yifshar shelo yeh tzaddik. If he knows already in advance that this man will be a tzaddik, then it's impossible for him not to be a tzaddik. That's very, very simple. If Kadosh Baruch Hu 2 years ago knew that I will choose the right thing, then I really didn't have a choice. 2 years later, he knew 2 years in advance. Not 2 years, he actually knew thousands of years in advance, whatever. I don't know even if the word years here is appropriate. God knew before I had the choice what I'll choose. So that means that I don't have a freedom of choice. Very simple. If it's already dictated, it doesn't matter that I don't know. God knows. That means that I really didn't have a choice objectively. He says, the Rambam says, we're stuck here. we're stuck here. Theologically, we're stuck here. We don't want to limit God's knowledge, because if God's knowledge is limited, then he's not complete, then he's not a God. So his knowledge is not limited. Not limited, that means that he knows exactly what everyone will choose. But on the other hand, if he knows exactly what everyone will choose, then we don't have really a freedom of choice, because it's already known what I'm going to choose, so it's not that I really had any freedom. And you don't want, and on the other hand, we're stuck theologically, because I already presented that the Rambam thinks that theologically it's very important to maintain the concept of freedom of choice, the doctrine of freedom of choice. So we're stuck. Well, either way, we're going to pay a theological price. If we're going to limit God's knowledge, we're paying a price. And if we're going to limit our choice, our freedom of choice, we're also going to pay a theological price. Now, that's the point. Line 3, towards the end. Da, you should know. שתשובת שאלה זו ארוכה מארץ מידה ורחבה מן הים. The answer to this question is very, very broad. וכמה עיקרים גדולים והערים רמים תלויים בה. And some foundations, important, significant foundations are dependent on it. But you need to know in what I'm saying. We already explained in the second chapter in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't know, אינו יודע מדעה שהיא חוץ ממנו כבני אדם שהם ודעתם שונים, אלא הוא יתעלה שמו ודעתו אחד. ואין דעתו של אדם יכולה להשיג דבר זה על בוריו. Okay, the Rambam, I don't want to focus on this. I want to get more till the end. Actually, I see here that I should have even did 3 dots, that well. But I'll say this orally, and then we'll jump to the place that I want to focus on. Rambam basically saying, the answer is very complicated. Very, very complicated. But I'll just lay out here one idea, and that is that when we're saying that God knows something, and we're saying that we human beings know something, even though we use the same term, know, but it's qualitatively different things. Because God's knowledge and Him are one. God, Hashem Echad. He's not composed of particles. It's a simple oneness. Meaning He and the knowledge is the same thing. Whereas we are not the same with our knowledge. A very simple proof. There's here in the crowd some very, very smart people. And I'm sure that if I'm going to approach one of you about a topic that I don't know, and that was your profession, I'll ask something out of curiosity, and then you're going to enrich me, then I can, then in point of time, chronologically, beforehand I didn't know it, and afterwards I knew it. That means that me, Avi Kanai, and the knowledge are not one, okay? There's some things I know, some things I don't know yet, and I will know. Okay, with God, it's totally different. He is the knowledge. Okay, you could say even that. He is the ultimate knowledge. So he says our whole contradiction. He says, I'll tell you, I'm not answering you exactly. The Rambam says, but the answer has to do with this concept because we're assuming the question is based. We're applying the way we understand knowing, and actually God knows differently. Okay? And he says, one second. And he says, and the mind of a human being cannot understand this thing totally. He already says, what I explain now, we don't really comprehend fully. Yeah, what is it?
Well, I know it's going to sound semi-heretical, but I don't. Again, we know with the Shekhinah, God can limit His presence, but His presence. Why can't we say God has all not? But in terms of man, He chooses. God chooses
to limit. Right.
Limit his
so that's definitely one of the answers. I explained this thing. The Rambam doesn't want to say that because I think the whole idea of limiting, it's a Kabbalistic idea. Rambam and Kabbalah are fire and water. And by the way, I have a rationalist in my crowd, that I spoke about. You'll see later I have sources about Tzimtzum. This congregant, who is a very smart guy, he doesn't like Tzimtzum. He says he can't understand that. It's a higher level of how do you say this word? And what? Anthropomorphism that you don't see in the sages, whatever. Dafka, I like Tzimtzum, and I think that's a good direction here in freedom of choice. The Rambam didn't go on this track, okay, and he has he had good reasons not to go on this track. And with the idea of revelation now. Look, I humbly request that I made a mistake here. I know, because I started. Our topic is not the topic of freedom of choice. You'll see, okay, it deserves a discussion, but that's not our topic here. I'm just saying, so he says, a person cannot, he lays a certain assumption, and he says, a person can't, even what I said now, that God's knowledge and our knowledge are different, we don't fully comprehend this, okay, he says, we don't fully comprehend this. And just like a person cannot really understand God or know God, because no one can see him, so he can't understand God's knowledge. And he quotes the prophet that says, my thoughts are not like your thoughts. And since this is the situation, we don't know how God knows and is mashgiach on all the bruim, all the creatures, but we know that God, that a person has a freedom of choice, and God is not forcing him. We know that, and we don't know that only because of tradition, but we know that out of even logic, and therefore a man is judged for his deeds because there is a freedom of choice. Period. And the Rambam here ends his presentation. He says, okay, there is a contradiction here. I'm not giving you the full answer. The answer has to do with the fact that God's knowledge is different than our knowledge. We don't fully understand. A human being, he's saying myself, can't fully understand what does it mean, God's knowledge. But just believe me, the Rambam said, or not believe me, we know that we have a freedom of choice, period. That's end of presentation of the Rambam. Now, the Ravid, Rabbi Avraham ben David of Per Square, he has here a glossary. Amar Avraham. Okay, so I just want to say, where am I reading? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 rows from the bottom of the source, of the first source. Amar Avraham, you see there in the middle of the row, Aleph. Aleph means Amar Avraham. Yeah, the glossaries start this way. The Ravid says, Avraham said, Rabbi Avraham said, Lo nahag zeh mechaber minhag hachachamim. I want to focus on this sentence, so I'll read that slower. Lo nahag zeh mechaber minhag hachachamim. He's criticizing Maimonides. He's saying the author here did not act the way smart people act. He didn't do a smart thing. He's saying the Ravid spoke much more sharp against the Rambam than this quote. So don't worry. He says if you learn Mishnah Torah, you'll see even much stronger criticisms of the Rambam with harsher words. Okay, this is even pretty, relatively pretty polite. Okay, Lo nahag zeh mechaber minhag hachachamim. The author, meaning Maimonides, didn't here act the way smart people act. Why? Now, why is he so upset? She'ein adam matchil bedavar. A person, an author, should not start with something velo yada le'ashlimo, and doesn't know how to complete it. Meaning the Rambam here openly says, look, I'm giving you a direction, but we don't fully understand this. Yeah? So the Ravid doesn't like it. He says, a smart author won't start writing something if he can't complete it. V'hu echel, and he started b'sheilot kushiyot. he started asking questions, והניח הדבר בקושיה, and he left it unanswered as a question, והחזירו לאמונה, and then he says, okay, just believe that there is a freedom of choice. וטוב היה לו, and it would have been better if he should have, להניח הדבר בתמימות התמימים, to leave it to the tmimus, I don't know how to translate that, the simpleness, whatever, to the tmimus of the people, ולא יעורר ליבם, and he should not start off with questions, meaning, if you have a good answer, write the question and write the answer. If you don't have a good answer, just don't raise the question at all, and let the people just stay with their simple belief. ולא יעורר ליבם ויניח דעתם בספק, and he shouldn't arouse in their hearts doubts and leave ויניח דעתם בספק, and then he will leave them with a doubt. ואולי שעה אחת יבוא הרהור בליבם על זה. He says, what achrayus do you think, Maimonides? Maybe one time they will have heresicism thoughts in their hearts because of what you just raised up and didn't answer. And then he says, ואף על פי שאין תשובה ניצחת. And despite the fact that there's no comprehensive answer, על זה טוב הוא לסמוך לו קצת תשובה. And then the Rabbi offers his own direction, which I don't want to go into, even though it's pretty simple. I'll just say, in a nutshell, he makes the famous distinction that, by the way, I don't like that much, but it's not for now again. He says there is a difference between knowledge and decree, meaning God sees, he has an eternal view. No, it's a nice thing. He has an eternal view, but he doesn't force you. Tachlis, it does have to do also with the Rambam's answer, but then at the end he says, V'kol zeh eineno shaveh. Yeah, that's his last word. And all of this is not worth it. Meaning, he acknowledges the fact that we really don't know exactly a good answer to that. But his claim, and I want to focus on that, not on the topic, again, of freedom of choice, but rather on the dispute here between the Ramban and the Ravid. The Ravid says, hey, if you can't answer, don't write the question, because you might cause people that read your book to be left with a doubt and then go to heresicism. And it's better just not to raise the question at all. And the people, if they're not aware of the question, because you didn't write it, they'll continue with their innocent, simple belief. And that's all. That's his. And the Rambam didn't act wisely. Okay, so now I'm asking the question, who do you identify more with, Maimonides and the Ravid?
They disagree.
Why?
No, who said they disagree? But
What?
just said you shouldn't ask the question. He didn't propose an answer.
What?
The Rabbi didn't propose an answer.
No, he did propose, but it doesn't matter. I'm now focusing on the very claim that he says, hey, if you don't have a good answer, if you don't have an answer, it's better not to raise up the question.
Yeah, so maybe if you put out the question, somebody will have the answer for you.
Okay, but look what I took from here, and it's not that I heard this from someone. I was reading it one time several years ago, and I said, that's amazing. That's really an educational dispute, and maybe for different societies and different environments, there are different answers. And the Ravid had in mind a certain people that he thought that that's the right approach. But let's say in our generation, in the modern world, in our generation, in the modern world, I identify with the Rambam. Meaning, let me just clarify. 1 second. Let me just clarify. Take a typical high schooler, especially in our religious Zionist modern Orthodox society, but today I don't think even there. So Okay, I won't raise up the question. Great. He'll discover the question very soon. I don't even say from the web or whatever, but even way before that, I thought he'll grow up, he'll go to the army or whatever, he will talk with people, and then what will he think? Oh, my educators, they were so stupid. They taught me this emunah. There's such a important question here. Probably they weren't aware of it even. There's some stupid people. And then he will, do whatever. Meaning, what will cause the heresiism? The fact that I didn't raise the question, and if I will openly, let's say in 9th grade, will tell him, look here, there's a question. You know what? I'm a rabbi. I don't know the answer. And I'm still a believer. Even though I don't know the answer. Okay, that's a certain kind of inoculation, that when he comes later, it's not that he invented the wheel now. He discovered all of a sudden his eyes got open, and now he saw that the educators, the religious educators that taught him are just superficial. Now it's built in. He knows that part of the Jewish world and belief is also struggles with questions that we don't know answers. And why? I'll tell him, and why? Just like the Rambam says, because there's an infinite gap. I hope I pronounced it correctly. There's an infinite gap between man and God. And since there's an infinite gap, so built in, there are things that we don't know and don't understand. Lahefech, this is part. Now I'm returning to my starting point. I have answers to all your questions. Yeah, religion means that I'm the answer provider. No, religion, belief, faith means that there's an infinite gap between human beings and God. And therefore, within the system, built in the system, is that there are gaps. Now, of course, we're getting closer and closer, and but as I said, it's an infinite process. Even I'm getting closer and closer and closer, and still, the more I get closer, I'll have new question, because the gap is infinite. Okay, so much better educationally. Now the first source here is educational. Yeah, much the Rambam and the Ravid. Yeah, there's the by the way, we're now Thursday. There's the famous joke that a guy got a heretic, became a heretic, went off the derech, I don't know, and it was asked why. So, and then they discovered that every Friday night he was learning a barbanel. A barbanel on the Torah, the way it's structured, he asked like 20 questions. Hashela achat, hashela shtayim, hashela in every parsha it goes, and then he starts answering them. Now it's very long. He asks many questions. Now this guy fell asleep in the middle of the questions or in the end of the question. He never read the answers. So it was a Friday night. He reads the questions and then he falls asleep. So it was discovered that he became a heretic because he only read the questions. Now that's kind of a Ravid. That's a Ravid sentiment. This joke. Yeah, it's a joke, of course. Meaning, yeah, there are some people that have emunah tamima, and you can ruin it and spoil it if you're acting like the Rambam. Okay, that's what the Ravid says. And by the way, it might be true that in some circles, in our generation, I highly doubt, meaning these circles became fewer and fewer and perhaps no longer exist. Okay? I'm talking even about Haredi. We speak with Haredi people and Haredi youth, and they're exposed. Again, I can't account to all groups. Okay? So there might be groups that the Ravid's argument is applicable to them. But in general, the vast majority, I think the Rambam's educational approach, where do I increase the chances that a guy will become a heretic? If I'll take the Rambam's approach or the Ravid's approach, pretty clear to me that in our generation, meaning Ravid tells them, you're going to cause people to be heretics. I think it's vice versa. It's exactly the opposite. If the kid will know that his educators are aware, his rabbis are aware of these questions. And yes, they humbly tell him, we don't fully understand this, okay? That will be a much more important message and a message that will dafka prepare him to life when it won't be for him a discovery of the wheel that this thing doesn't work or it's a question.
What about the educator who knows what the answers are and fears hearing the question?
What do you mean fears hearing the
He's
question?
frightened that the student or whoever is going to ask, is ultimately going to ask a question to which he does know the answer, but it is going to trouble the person who's asked the question.
I don't know if he knows the answer. I'm not sure what you're talking about. If the educator knows, I could have understood your question. What about the educator who's afraid that the student will ask him a question that he doesn't know the answer, and then it will break his authority, whatever. But why should he be afraid of it? Now, in terms of, that's always in education. If the educator thinks that the Talmud is not yet prepared to fully comprehend the answer, so we always do that. So we teach gradually. We are always adjusting the messages to the people that could hear it. That's the art of education. Let's go now to the next source. The next source I want to bring Rabbi Amital. And now I'm not bringing him, even though there are great quotes of Rav Amital himself regarding it. I'm reading here something that is quoted, Rabbi Amnon Bazak, a Rebbe in Gush, quotes Rav Amital. So now let's read it. Rav Amital Zatzal presented a unique. I'm translating, and those who want can follow me in the Hebrew. Okay, Rav Amital Zatzal presented a unique approach in the religious coping with the topic of the Holocaust. All right, you know what? Beforehand, I'll give some background. Rav Amital was born in Transylvania, in Hungary. He was a teenager during the Shoah, I think already an older teenager. Rav Amital didn't grow up in a rabbinic family, even though some of his great-grandparents were rabbis, but his parents, whatever, it wasn't a rabbinic family. He learned in high school in a yeshiva in Hungary that was very unique, a very small yeshiva. There was a rabbi there he was very close to, Rabbi Chaim Levi. He was a Hungarian with a Hungarian methodology of learning, with the Maharsha, Maharam, whatever. But he learned in Lithuania, and their vision was, they were mamash dreamers, how to combine the Lithuanian conceptual, brisker method of learning, combining this with the Hungarian style of learning. That was their project, and they had a lot of dreams. And then the Holocaust came, and Rav Amital says that he asked his Rebbe, now what will be with all of our dreams? And he told him, if this is the will of God, we'll just accept it. Now his rabbi, the Rosh Yeshiva, he was killed. He was perished in the Holocaust. All of Rav Amital's family perished in the Holocaust. All of his nucleus family. And Rav Amital came here as a refugee right after the Holocaust, as a young man, alone. And he went to the army. He went to learn in Hebron. He had a special relationship with Rav Kook's Torah, and that is because he found in Hungary, when he was a high schooler, a little booklet with the Torah of Rav Kook, and he read it all night, and it really inspired him, and this thing was in his pocket all the Holocaust. And then when he came here, he learned in Hebron, but let's say Shalosh Sudas, he was going to hear the talk of Rav Harlap, a student of Rav Kook. Not all the people in Hebron liked it. He went, as I said, he went to the army in the 48 war, And then later on, he became a Rebbe in Rehovot and taught Torah till after 67. He was called to found the yeshiva in Gush Etzion. He wasn't planning to stay at Rosh Yeshiva. He was a very simple man. He was a very big Talmid Chacham, but he planned to bring a force to be a Rosh Yeshiva after founding it and then to leave. So he invited Rav Lichtenstein, and he wrote him a letter and signed to America, inviting him to head the yeshiva, and he signed Yehuda. And Rav Lichtenstein thought that it's just one of the workers in the yeshiva. But then when he came, he saw Rav Amital's personality and power, and then he said that he's willing to be the Rosh Yeshiva, but he has a stipulation that they both together are leading the yeshiva, and the rest is history. At any rate, so that was Rav Amital, and now Rav Amital, one thing that is very critical about him, and I heard it myself in my ears, but it's written in the biography that Eliyashi Leichner wrote. As we know, Rav Amital married the daughter of Reb Tzvi Yehuda Meltzer, who was later the head rabbi of Rehovot, and was the son of one of the giants, Rabbi Zalman Meltzer. So he married Rabbi Zalman Meltzer's granddaughter, Rabbanit Amital, that we had the privilege to close to her. She passed away several months ago. At any rate, when he was at a certain chizuk in Pardes Chana, and Reb Tzvi Yehuda Meltzer was there, so he, as a young boy, a young man, still not married, he started asking him about the Shoah, and Rav Amital was very consistent and insisting and very stubborn. He told him, Hatzur tamim po'alo ki chol d'rachav mishpat, el emunah ve'en avel tzadik ve'yashar hu. I believe God is straight, is yeah. I don't understand this, I can't understand it, and I have no answer to this. And Reb Tzvi Yehuda Meltzer started to give him all kinds of, all the theological attempts to explain the Shoah, and Rav Amital was very stubborn as a young man. He was even rejecting all of them. He says, no, nothing explains that. We can't comprehend, God, Rachum v'Chanun, with such an event, with 1 million babies perished. Nothing can justify that. I'm left with an unanswered question. Period. Since he was young, and with that position, he held to this position till the end of his life, and we heard it from him again and again. I'll elaborate on it more. I'm just giving the general thing. And then, let's see. Rav Amital Zatzal, says Rabbi Bazak, presented a unique position, coping religiously with the topic of the Shoah. On the one hand, morally, he totally negated, it was against, all kinds of generations that are trying to explain rationally the Holocaust as a punishment or as a price that Am Yisrael had to pay in order to detach, uproot from the exile and to found the state of Israel. And he held that there can't be any sufficient moral explanation to all of what happened in the Holocaust. But on the other hand, the rabbi refused also to accept the more pleasant solution that it's a hester panim, that is kiviyachol removing God's responsibility to the Shoah. So he didn't like that too. The rabbi claimed that you can't ignore the presence of God in the Holocaust. And here's the quote from Rav Amital. What happened there was so enormous, I don't know, tehumi, meaning what? Yeah, so abnormal that you can't really think in any rational thought was so much, so I could see this only something metaphysical, a certain God's hand. I saw God's hand clearly in the Holocaust because of the magnitude of the event. I just didn't understand the meaning of it. I saw gdudim. How do you say gdud? Brigade? What?
Regiments.
Battalions. I saw full battalions of Germans that are not going to the Russian frontier, front, because all the trains were, the wagons were occupied by Jews, and that was against any army interest. Can one understand it? It's totally not rational. In all of this, I saw the hand of God. So he says, Hester Panim, I don't accept, says Rav Amital. And I want to return and elaborate on the first thing. Rav Amital once told my friend Rabbi Dr. Tamir Granot, that wrote a lot about Shoah and theological coping with the Shoah. As you know, Rabbi Tamir Granot is the father of Seren Amitai Granot, Hashem Yikom Damo. So, he told Rabbi Granot writes it in the book, that all my life, I don't remember exactly the quote, I fought about two directions. I'll say it in my words. The Haredi explanations to the Holocaust, it's a punishment for assimilation, Hester Panim for assimilation, whatever. That's one track. And against the Zionist explanation. Rav Amital, he told her, you can't suspect Rav Amital to be not a religious Zionist. Not only he himself served in the army, not only he himself led Hester Bachurim to fight, not only he encouraged us to learn academically, and his offsprings, that's the Lackmus test. What are you educating your kids? So his son went to the army, and it was in Hester, and all his son-in-laws, whatever. So no one can say he celebrated Yom Ha'atzmaut. No one can suspect Rav Amital not to be a kosher religious Zionist. And yet the Zionists' explanations for the Holocaust, or justifications for the Holocaust, however you want, he totally rejected them. B'diuk at the same extent that he rejected the Haredi explanations. Meaning, and now I'll be more clear. If we have the Haredi explanations like, the Satmar or whatever, that it's a punishment for assimilation, whatever. So Reb Tzvi Yehuda Cohen Cook wrote, and the Rabbi Bazak in his words, without mentioning the name, refers exactly to that the Holocaust was a needed, very painful surgery, a very hard surgery done to uproot the people of Israel from the exile. So Rav Amital said, the state of Israel is very precious to me, and I celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut, but 1 million babies perishing, even the foundation of the state of Israel doesn't justify such a thing, or doesn't explain it. Meaning, at the end of the day, he says, this is the thing. I'm a believer. I believe that God is righteous and all of this. I believe in this. And this event is not compatible with it. And I'm left with an unanswered question as a believer. And that's my position. So that was Rav Amital. Let's continue. Shtei anachot. I'm in the 5th row in the 2nd page. Shtei anachot alalu. These two assumptions that are expressing two founding principles in the life of the rabbi: the commitment to truth and morals, brought him to the clear result regarding his attitude towards the Shoah. I'm continuing to stand and to live with questions that even the prophets didn't always have answers to them, said the rabbi. And he added, we are standing silent in front of the phenomena of the Holocaust, and we have no answer. This is one of the tests that God is testing us. Despite everything, we are continuing to cling to God. Bivchinat barachnu mimcha elecha. We ran away from you to you. But an answer, aval tshuva en. But an answer we don't have. Okay? So that is Rabbi Amital. That was something very central in his in his existential being, meaning that the fact that the Holocaust is an event that, as a believer, there's a question or something. That the Holocaust is an event that I, as a believer, I'm confronting it, and I have an unanswered question. I think we have 10 more minutes, something like that. Okay. So now I'm going to so I'll just, in a nutshell, I'll just make a interim summary. We saw the dispute between the Rambam and the Ravid regarding the contradiction between freedom of choice and God's knowledge, Yediyah Uvchira, and we saw that educationally they had two opposing approaches. Whereas the Ravid says, don't expose the student to questions that there are no answers to it. It's better to leave him without knowing the question. That way he'll remain in his pure emunah. And the Rambam said, we saw that he didn't hesitate to ask the question and leave it not fully answered. And we said that, in my opinion, especially in our era, Dafka educationally, I think the Rambam gains more. But that's in a question how the Rambam says. We don't understand God. That's what the Rambam says. Just like you don't understand God in all kinds of, you don't understand Him, you can't really reach Him, so you also don't understand His knowledge, the way that's the way He knows. So that was the Rambam. Then I showed Rav Amital saying, yeah, I'm a believer, and Dafka, because I'm a believer, I'm left with an unanswered question. The Holocaust is an unanswered question. And he also alludes to the fact that the prophets also didn't hesitate, like Habakkuk, to ask God, how do you run this world? You see here Rishaim that are celebrating and Tzaddikim that are suffering, and he doesn't present an answer, Habakkuk. He's just challenging God and asking him. So the prophets weren't embarrassed, apparently, to say that they have questions, unanswered questions when they had a dialogue with God. Okay, I can tell you that Rav Amital once told me, in a much less dramatic context. It was, the first Gulf War, and I kind of asked him. There was a tish. I was a young student, and I saw something that he was doing something against things that he. About pikuach nefesh. So he said, I remember it, he said, yesh lecha kushya, yesh li kushyot al atzmi. Meaning, I have some unanswered questions regarding myself. Okay, now, I don't fully understand everything even regarding myself. At any rate, I'll just conclude this part, and I think that next week we'll see Rav Soloveitchik. That's Likutei Moharan. Yeah, I promised Tzimtzum. So there we go. This is a famous Torah of Reb Nachman Mibreslev. A very famous Torah of him. Now I'll just give a little background. The Torah is based on the doctrine of the Ari Kadosh that a lot of Mekubalim and Hasidim followed. That, how was the world created? And I'll explain. We don't understand how. Don't worry, I won't answer you how it was. That's another unanswered question. I mean, God created somehow the world. It's very paradoxical. God is totally spiritual. Is not. There's no anthropomorphism, however you pronounce it. And somehow there is some link between him and this physical world that he created it. Okay, so we don't fully understand how. We know that the Torah describes that he's saying Yehi'o, that he says things, and then the world is created. But what the Mekubalim are troubled with is that since God is Meloch Kol Haaretz Kvodo, God, and I'll say it more clearly. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That means the Rambam. Here there is a coalition between the Rambam and the Mekubalim. How does the Rambam start his famous essay, the Mishneh Torah Rambam, the code book? The only true thing is God. Really, in a sense, the only thing that exists is God. in the meaning of strong existence. Ki ein od milvado. Not only melo chol haaretz kvodo. Ein od milvado. There's nothing. If there's anything that is totally distinct from God, then there is no monotheism. Meaning, think about it. What does it mean, monotheism? That means that there's only one thing here. That's God. If there's any entity that is external to God, any entity that is an agent, that has a power, whatever, then that's a problem. You have many gods, whatever. So you must say, so the problem that the Mekubalim are busy with is where was there room for this world? If Melo chol haaretz kvodo, if he is everything, and there's nothing but him, so where, technically, what room? That means, how can there be another entity? B'kitzur, again, I'm saying. So the answer that the Ari HaKadosh gave is that God voluntarily, willingly, contracted, that's the word? Contracted himself, meaning left space, removed somehow, and then he made space for something different than him, meaning the world. Now, of course, you're stuck because, okay, so he left, so now there is another entity. So that's why it's paradoxical. Reb Nachman here explains that he contracted himself, but of course he's still there somewhat. So it's a contradiction, and of course, Professor Rothenberg, say Jewish psychologist, so they took it for an ethical thing that God gives a space, and we should follow him, and we should also give space, v'chulei. Okay? At any rate, let's now read Reb Nachman and how that relates to our topic. So the Rambam's, Reb Nachman's Torah here says the following: "Aval yesh od min apikosi." There is another form of heresicism. Ve'em chochmot she'einam chochmot, and these are the chochmot that are not really chochmot, but because they are deep and no one really answers them, so they appear as if they're chachamim. Like, for instance, when one says a false svara in Gemara Perish Tosfot, Gempet, meaning in Gemara Rashi Tosfot, and because there's no sufficient lamdan there to answer the question, so it seems that this is a great question. But really, if there was a smart person there, the well-learned scholar, you would discover that it's not a svar at all. On the same token, there's some wonderings and kashis in some of the researchers, the mechakrim, the questioners, that are really not smart, and really you could answer them totally. But because mankind mind cannot answer them, so they appear as if they are questions. But really, you can't answer these questions, because these questions of this heresy, they're stemming from the open space, the evacuated space. Because there, in that evacuated space, kiviyachol, there is no godness there. And therefore, the kashas that are coming from them, that are like the evacuated space, human mind cannot find them an answer, meaning to find their God. Because if he would have found them, Hashem Yitbarach, then it wouldn't evacuate it. And then everything was infinite. All was God. And therefore, regarding this type of heresy, it says, Kol ba'eh lo yeshuvun. It's a drash. All of the questions cannot be answered. Because there's no answer, at least the human mind cannot provide any answer to this kind of heresicism, these questions, because it is stemming from the evacuated space. Because from there, God contracted his godness, kiviyachol. Just the people of Israel, by belief, they are bridging, they're skipping these chokhmot, and even regarding this apikorsis that is coming from the open space, because they believe in God with no chakira and chachma, only with complete belief. You see, we can go back to that next week, but I'll now say things and we can elaborate about it a little bit next week, also connected to Purim. But I'll say, Rav Nachman here, and I'm not the only one that says that. You know, Rav Nachman and the Rambam, it's like two different worlds, but I'm saying Rav Nachman, as many scholars are saying, and I think this is a classic piece that illustrates that, preceded his time. What? Was ahead of his time. Rav Nachman was ahead of his time. I mean, like a postmodern era, etc. He chopped things that only 200 years later became very, very popular, both in Jewish history in terms of belief. Kitzur, Rav Nachman is telling us the truth. The fact that some questions on Emunah, we have good answers to them. It could be good questions. There could be good answers, of course. But some questions, he said, mankind, our human mind is limited, and we cannot provide them answers. And we're left with a question, and the only way to bridge the gap is belief. Pretty similar to what the Rambam says there in there. Rak na'amin shehu noten lanu bchira chofshit. Yeah, neida. He says neida. So, and Reb Nachman gives also an explanation. He says, you know why there is this phenomena, that there are some questions that the human mankind is limited and cannot give answers? Because there he comes back to the theology of creation, and he says, we are assuming that there is a certain space that God removed his presence from there. So questions that are stemming from that space, that evolve from that space, inherently, meaning in my system, says Reb Nachman, inherently, there are questions that you won't be able to answer. Because if every question there was an ability to answer it, then there would be no world. There'll be only God here. In depth, what he says, that exactly what I said in different words in the beginning of the class. I said there is an infinite gap between us and God, and less. If we would have known every, then we were gods. I don't know. Okay, then, and we're not gods because there's only one God. So he said God removed his presence, kiviyachol, from a certain domain, and from that domain, there are questions that are without answers because there is no God's presence there in that sense. So, yeah.
The questions that are coming from that area, since we don't have an answer, they sound very profound.
Right, they sound, he said, he gave a parable. He gave a parable. He said, let's say in the Beis Midrash, there's a guy that asks a tremendous question, and there's no lamdan there. But if a certain tremendous lamdan would appear, he would answer his question. But since this lamdan is not present, that it seems like a tremendous question. He says here, God is not here in that space. So God is, in the parable, God is the lamdan that is absent. Okay? Alright. בסדר, שיהיה לכולם שבת שלום. And Bezrat Hashem, next week.